Nighttime can feel long, and sometimes our thoughts are louder than the silence around us. But God's Word is full of stories that remind us of His care, His promises, and His peace. Each story you are about to hear is meant to guide your heart into stillness. As you listen, let the words sink in like a gentle lullaby from heaven. Soon your soul will rest in the arms of the one who never sleeps nor slumbers. As you settle into rest, let us begin with the story of Ruth. Ruth's story reminds us that God's care never fades, even when life feels uncertain. During the time when judges ruled the land of Israel, there lived a man named Eli with his beloved wife Naomi and their two sons, Marlon and Chilion. They were a close family, bound together by love and faith, living peacefully in their small home, surrounded by fields of barley and wheat. But then came a time of great famine in the land. The rains ceased, the crops withered, and the earth became dry. Food became scarce, and families throughout Bethlehem struggled to survive. Eli, looking upon his hungry family with a heavy heart, made the difficult decision to leave their homeland and journey to the country of Moab, where they had heard there was still bread to be found. So the family gathered their few possessions and made the long journey across the desert sands to Moab. There, in this foreign land with different customs and different gods, they settled and slowly began to rebuild their lives. The sons Marlon and Chilion grew to manhood in this new place, and in time each found love and married beautiful Moabite women. Marlon married a gentle soul named Ruth, whose eyes sparkled with kindness, while Chilion wed a woman of grace and beauty. For a time, all was well. The small family lived together in harmony, sharing meals and stories, laughter and tears. But as the years passed, sorrow came to visit them like an unwelcome guest. First, Elimelech fell ill and passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving Naomi to mourn her dear companion. Then tragedy struck again, and both sons died young, leaving behind their wives but no children to carry on their names. Naomi found herself alone with her two daughters-in-law in a foreign land, her heart heavy with grief. She had heard news that the Lord had blessed her homeland once again, that the famine had ended and bread was plentiful in Bethlehem. The fields were green again, the harvest abundant, and her people were no longer hungry. Her heart longed for home, for the familiar hills and valleys of her youth, for the comfort of her own people and the God of her fathers. One morning, as the sun rose gently over the Moabite hills, Naomi called Ruth and Orpah to her side. "My dear daughters," she said, her voice soft but determined, "I have decided to return to Bethlehem. The Lord has provided food for His people there, and I long to be among my own family again. But you, my precious girls, should stay here in the land of your birth. Go, return each to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me." Naomi embraced each of them tenderly, her tears falling like gentle rain. "May the Lord grant that you find rest, each in the house of her husband." She kissed them farewell, but both young women began to weep, their sobs echoing in the quiet morning air. "No," they said together, "we will return with you to your people." Their loyalty touched Naomi's heart, but she shook her head sadly. "Turn back, my daughters," she urged them gently. "Why will you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I should have hope, even if I should have a husband tonight and should also bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? No, my daughters, it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." They wept together again, their tears mingling like streams joining a river. Then Orpah, though her heart was breaking, kissed her mother-in-law farewell and turned back toward her family's home, her figure growing smaller in the distance until she disappeared among the hills. But Ruth clung to Naomi like a vine to a tree, her hands gentle but firm, her eyes bright with unshed tears, but also with fierce determination, looked into Naomi's weathered face. What she said next would echo through the ages, words of such beauty and loyalty that they would be remembered forever. "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from following you," Ruth said, her voice clear and strong despite her tears. "For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me." Naomi saw the steadfast love in Ruth's eyes, the unwavering commitment that would not be shaken, and she knew that no words could change this young woman's heart. So together, the two women began their journey to Bethlehem, walking slowly along the dusty roads, supporting each other through the heat of the day and resting together under the cool stars at night. When they arrived in Bethlehem, it was the beginning of the barley harvest. The fields were golden and ready, swaying gently in the warm breeze like waves on a peaceful sea. The whole city stirred with excitement at their arrival, for many remembered Naomi from years before. "Is this Naomi?" the women asked each other, gathering around with curious but kind faces. "Do not call me Naomi," she replied sadly. "Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord has brought me home again empty." But Ruth stood beside her, a living testament to the love that surrounded Naomi even in her sorrow. They found a small house to live in, but they had little money and no food stored away. Ruth, seeing their need, spoke gently to her mother-in-law. "Let me go to the field and glean heads of grain, after him in whose sight I may find grace." Naomi nodded, her heart full of gratitude for this daughter who had chosen to stay with her. "Go, my daughter," she said softly. So Ruth went out as the morning dew still glistened on the grass and happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was a relative of Elimelech. Boaz was a man of wealth and standing in the community, but more importantly, he was a man of kindness and integrity, one who followed the ways of the Lord with a gentle heart. When Boaz came from Bethlehem to check on his harvest, he greeted his reapers with warmth. "The Lord be with you." And they answered cheerfully, "The Lord bless you." Boaz noticed Ruth immediately, this young woman who worked so diligently among the grain, her movements graceful even in her labor. He asked his servant, who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" The servant replied respectfully, "It is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She asked permission to glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves, and she has continued working steadily from morning until now, except for a short rest in the house. Boaz's heart was moved with compassion and admiration. He approached Ruth, his voice gentle and welcoming. "Hear me, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." Ruth fell on her face before him, bowing to the ground in gratitude, her heart overwhelmed by such unexpected kindness. "Why have I found grace in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" Boaz smiled warmly, his eyes twinkling with admiration. "It has been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before. The Lord repay your work, and a full reward be given you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Ruth's heart filled with joy like a cup overflowing with sweet water.
Let me find favor in your sight, my lord, for you have comforted me and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants." At mealtime, Boaz called to her gently, "Come here and eat of the bread, and dip your piece in the vinegar." So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed roasted grain to her. And she ate until she was satisfied, and even had some left over. When she rose up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men privately, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Also, let grain from the bundles fall purposely for her. Leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her." So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening, working peacefully under the warm sun, her heart light with gratitude. When she beat out what she had gleaned, it was about an ephah of barley, far more than she had dared to hope for. She carried it back to the city, and when Naomi saw how much she had brought, her eyes widened with amazement. Ruth also brought out and gave to her what she had kept back after she had eaten enough. Naomi asked wonderingly, "Where did you glean today, and where did you work? Blessed be the one who took notice of you." Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man whose field she had worked in, and said, "The name of the man with whom I worked today is Boaz." Naomi's face lit up with joy like dawn breaking over the hills. "Blessed be he of the Lord who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead." She paused, her voice growing warm with hope. "This man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives." Ruth continued, "He also said to me, 'You shall stay close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest.'" Naomi nodded wisely, her heart beginning to see the Lord's hand in these events. "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, and that people do not meet you in any other field." So Ruth stayed close to the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of barley harvest and wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. The days passed peacefully, filled with honest work under the blue sky, and slowly, quietly, love began to bloom in the field like flowers after spring rain. As the harvest season came to an end, Naomi, wise in the ways of her people, spoke to Ruth one evening as they sat together, watching the sunset paint the sky in gentle colors. "My daughter, shall I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? Indeed, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor." Naomi's plan was gentle and proper, following the customs of their people. She instructed Ruth in what to do, and Ruth, trusting in her mother-in-law's wisdom and in the Lord's providence, did exactly as she was told. That night, Ruth went quietly to the threshing floor, where Boaz lay sleeping peacefully after his work was done. She uncovered his feet and lay down softly, waiting with a heart full of hope and trust. At midnight, Boaz was startled and turned over, and there, in the soft moonlight, he saw a woman lying at his feet. His voice was gentle but surprised as he asked, "Who are you?" Ruth answered softly, "I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative." Boaz's heart filled with joy and admiration. "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman." But Boaz, being a man of honor and integrity, explained gently that there was a relative closer than he who had the first right according to their law. "If he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning." So Ruth lay at his feet until morning, and he gave her generous gifts of barley to take home, asking her not to let it be known that she had come to the threshing floor. The next morning Boaz went to the gate of the city, where business was conducted and matters were settled. There he waited until the closer relative passed by, and he called out to him, "Come aside, friend, sit down here." The man came and sat down, and Boaz gathered 10 men of the elders of the city as witnesses. Boaz explained the situation with wisdom and care. The relative, when he learned all that would be required of him, decided he could not take on the responsibility. Following the custom, he removed his sandal and gave it to Boaz, transferring all rights to him before the witnesses. Boaz turned to the elders and all the people gathered there, his voice ringing clear and joyful. "You are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Eli's and all that was Chilion's and Marlin's from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth, the Moabitess, the widow of Marlin, I have acquired as my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance." All the people at the gate and the elders said together, "We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel, and may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem." So Boaz took Ruth as his wife, and the Lord blessed their union with love that grew stronger each day, like a tree planted by streams of water. In time, the Lord blessed them with a son.
King Nebuchadnezzar, recognizing Daniel's extraordinary abilities, appointed him to high positions in his government. Daniel served faithfully, not seeking glory for himself, but always giving credit to God for the wisdom he possessed. Through Daniel's interpretations, the king learned the meaning of troubling dreams that had disturbed his sleep, and he came to respect the young Hebrew's God, though he did not abandon his own deities. When Nebuchadnezzar passed away and was succeeded by his son Belshazzar, Daniel continued to serve with the same integrity and wisdom. It was during Belshazzar's reign that Daniel interpreted the mysterious writing that appeared on the palace wall during a great feast. Those chilling words meant Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin, that foretold the fall of Babylon and the death of the king. That very night, as Daniel had prophesied, Belshazzar was slain, and the kingdom passed to the Medes and Persians under their king Darius. But Daniel's reputation for wisdom and integrity had spread throughout the land like sweet fragrance, and King Darius, recognizing his exceptional qualities, appointed him as one of 3 presidents who would oversee the entire kingdom. Daniel's wisdom and diligence in his duties soon distinguished him above the other presidents and all the governors, so that King Darius planned to set him over the entire realm. Daniel went about his work with quiet efficiency, his decisions marked by fairness and his conduct above reproach. He rose early each day, spent time in prayer and meditation, and approached each challenge with the calm confidence that comes from trusting in divine guidance. But Daniel's excellence stirred jealousy in the hearts of the other officials, like wind stirring up dust in a dry place.
The other presidents and governors began to search diligently for some fault in Daniel's administration, some error in his judgment, some corruption in his dealings. They examined his records like scholars poring over ancient texts. They questioned his decisions. They watched his every move with eagle eyes. Day after day they searched, week after week they scrutinized, but they found no corruption or negligence in Daniel whatsoever. His accounts balanced perfectly, his judgments were wise and fair, his conduct was beyond criticism. Finally, in frustration, they admitted to one another, "We shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God." These officials knew that Daniel was devoted to his faith, that 3 times each day he would kneel in his chamber, open his window toward Jerusalem, and pray to the God of Israel. This practice was as regular as the rising and setting of the sun, as constant as his breathing. Even in this foreign land, surrounded by pagan temples and idol worship, Daniel remained faithful to the customs of his ancestors and the commandments of his God. So these jealous men devised a cunning plan, approaching King Darius with honeyed words and false flattery. "King Darius, live forever," they said, bowing low before his throne. "All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors, princes, counselors, and captains, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions." They painted this proposal as a way to honor the king's divine authority, to strengthen his rule by requiring all his subjects to acknowledge him as their supreme ruler for 1 month. The idea appealed to Darius's pride, and the officials pressed their advantage, urging him to sign the decree quickly so that it could not be changed, for the laws of the Medes and Persians, once signed and sealed with the royal signet, were unalterable.
King Darius, flattered by their proposal and not seeing the trap they had laid, signed the document and sealed it with his ring, making it irrevocable law throughout his vast empire. When Daniel learned of this new law, he felt no anger, no fear, no desire to compromise his faith to save his life. Instead, he went to his house, and as was his custom, he opened his windows that faced toward Jerusalem, knelt down 3 times that day, and prayed and gave thanks before his God, just as he had always done. The golden light of the setting sun streamed through his window as he prayed, bathing his peaceful face in warm radiance as he communed with the Almighty. The conspirators, watching like vultures circling their prey, quickly gathered evidence of Daniel's continued prayer life. With malicious joy, they hurried back to the king and informed him of Daniel's crime. "Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?" they asked with false concern. The king confirmed that he had indeed signed such a decree. "Then Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day." As soon as King Darius heard these words, his heart sank like a stone dropped into deep water. He realized immediately that he had been manipulated, that these men had used his pride to trap the one official in his kingdom who was truly trustworthy and wise. The king spent the rest of the day desperately trying to find some way to deliver Daniel, consulting with lawyers and wise men, searching through legal precedents, but the law was clear and unchangeable. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the officials pressed the king relentlessly. "Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed." With a heavy heart, King Darius gave the order, and Daniel was brought to the mouth of the lion's den. The den was a deep pit carved into solid rock, with a narrow opening at the top that could be sealed with a massive stone.
Within this dark chamber prowled the royal lions, magnificent and terrible beasts that had been kept hungry to ensure they would devour any criminal cast down to them. As Daniel was lowered into the den, King Darius called out to him with a voice full of anguish and desperate hope, "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." The great stone was rolled over the mouth of the den and sealed with the king's signet ring and the rings of his lords, so that nothing could be changed concerning Daniel. The king returned to his palace, but he refused all entertainment that was brought before him. No musicians played their harps, no dancers performed, no jesters told their jokes. He dismissed his concubines and could not touch any food. Sleep fled from him like birds fleeing before a storm, and he spent the long night pacing his chambers, his heart heavy with worry for Daniel. Meanwhile, in the darkness of the lion's den, something miraculous was taking place. The great cats, which should have torn Daniel apart the moment he touched the floor of their domain, instead lay down peacefully around him like gentle house cats. An angel of the Lord had come down into that dark place, invisible to human eyes, but clearly seen by the lions, who recognized divine authority and submitted to it immediately. Daniel spent that night in perfect peace, surrounded by the very beasts that were meant to be his executioners. He prayed and meditated through the dark hours, his heart calm and trusting. The lions breathed quietly around him, their eyes reflecting what little light filtered down from above, but showing no hostility. It was as if the den had been transformed from a place of death into a sanctuary of divine protection.
As soon as dawn broke over the city, painting the eastern sky with pale light, King Darius rose and hurried to the lion's den, his heart pounded with anxiety and hope. As he approached the sealed opening with trembling voice, he cried out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions?" From the depths of the den came Daniel's voice, clear and strong and full of joy. "O King, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O King, I have done no wrong before you." King Darius was filled with exceeding gladness, like a parent whose lost child has been found alive and safe. He immediately commanded that Daniel be lifted up out of the den. And when they examined him, no injury was found on him whatsoever, not a scratch, not a bite, not even torn clothing. His faith in his God had protected him completely. The king's joy quickly turned to righteous anger against those who had deceived him. He ordered that the conspirators be brought forward along with their wives and children, and they were cast into the very den they had prepared for Daniel. The lions, no longer restrained by divine intervention, overpowered them before they even reached the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote a decree to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwelt throughout the earth. "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions." So Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. His faithfulness to God in the face of death had not only saved his own life, but had brought glory to the name of the Almighty throughout the vast Persian Empire. Kings and nobles, governors and common people heard the story of Daniel and the lions, and many came to respect and fear the God of Israel. Daniel continued to serve in the royal court with the same integrity and wisdom that had always marked his character. He interpreted more dreams and visions, always pointing to God as the source of all wisdom and knowledge. He lived to see the decree of Cyrus that allowed the Jewish exiles to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Though Daniel himself remained in Babylon, serving God faithfully in the place where divine providence had planted him. The story of Daniel reminds us that faith in God can sustain us through any trial, that integrity and faithfulness are never wasted, and that the God who shut the mouths of lions for Daniel's sake watches over all his children with the same protective love. Like Daniel, we can face each day with confidence, knowing that our lives are in the hands of one who is mightier than any earthly power, more faithful than any human friend, and more loving than any earthly father. In the quiet moments before sleep, we can remember Daniel's example and trust that the same God who protected him in the lion's den watches over us through the darkness of night, keeping us safe until the dawn of a new day breaks over our lives with fresh mercies and renewed hope. Now we move to the palace of Persia, where Esther, a young queen, was chosen to save her people. Like Daniel, her trust in God brought light to a fearful moment.
In the Persian Empire, which stretched from India to Ethiopia across 127 provinces, there ruled a great king named Ahasuerus. His palace in Shushan was a wonder to behold, with columns of marble and silver, gardens of exotic flowers, and courtyards paved with precious stones that gleamed like jewels in the sunlight.
The king himself was powerful beyond measure, able to command armies, build cities, and change the fate of nations with a single word. In the 3rd year of his reign, King Ahasuerus made a great feast for all his officials and servants, displaying the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty from many days, 180 days in all. The celebration was like nothing the world had ever seen, with golden vessels for drinking, purple and white tapestries held up with cords of fine linen, and couches of gold and silver arranged on pavements of marble and precious stones. When these days were over, the king made another feast, lasting 7 days for all the people present in Shushan, from the greatest to the least. They drank from golden cups, no two alike, and the royal wine was served in abundance according to the generosity of the king. The law of the drinking was that no one should be compelled, for the king had ordered all the officers of his household to serve each person according to his desire. Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, where she entertained the noble ladies with the same lavish generosity. She was renowned throughout the kingdom for her beauty, which was said to shine like the sun and moon together, captivating all who looked upon her. On the 7th day of the feast, when the king's heart was merry with wine, and the celebration had reached its peak, he commanded his 7 eunuchs to bring Queen Vashti before him, wearing her royal crown, that he might show her beauty to the people and the officials. But Queen Vashti, perhaps feeling that such a display would be inappropriate or undignified, refused to come at the king's command. The king became furious when he received word of her refusal, his anger burning like fire within him. He consulted with his wise men who understood law and justice, asking what should be done to Queen Vashti according to the law, since she had not obeyed his command.
One of his counselors, Meucon, spoke up with words that would change the course of history. Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the officials and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands and say, "King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come." The king and his nobles agreed that Queen Vashti should be deposed and never again come before the king, and that her royal position should be given to another who was better than she. A decree was sent throughout the empire stating that all wives should honor their husbands, both great and small. After these events, when the king's anger had subsided like a storm that has spent its fury, he remembered Vashti and what she had done. His servants suggested that beautiful young virgins be sought throughout all the provinces of his kingdom, that they might be brought to the palace where the king could choose a new queen from among them. Now in Shushan lived a Jewish man named Mordecai, a descendant of those who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity. He had adopted his young cousin Esther, whose Hebrew name was Hadassah, after her parents died. Esther was an orphan, but she had found in Mordecai a father's love and protection. She was beautiful in form and appearance, with eyes that sparkled like stars, and a gentle spirit that drew people to her like flowers turning toward the sun. When the king's decree was proclaimed, and many young women were gathered to the palace, Esther also was taken to the royal house and placed under the care of Haggai, the custodian of the women. Esther immediately found favor in Haggai's sight, and he provided her with beauty preparations, special food from the king's table, and 7 choice maid servants from the palace. One of his counselors, Meucon, spoke up with words that would change the course of history. Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the officials and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands and say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. The king and his nobles agreed that Queen Vashti should be deposed and never again come before the king, and that her royal position should be given to another who was better than she. A decree was sent throughout the empire stating that all wives should honor their husbands, both great and small. After these events, when the king's anger had subsided like a storm that has spent its fury, he remembered Vashti and what she had done. His servants suggested that beautiful young virgins be sought throughout all the provinces of his kingdom, that they might be brought to the palace where the king could choose a new queen from among them. Now in Shushan lived a Jewish man named Mordecai, a descendant of those who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity. He had adopted his young cousin Esther, whose Hebrew name was Hadassah, after her parents died. Esther was an orphan, but she had found in Mordecai a father's love and protection. She was beautiful in form and appearance, with eyes that sparkled like stars, and a gentle spirit that drew people to her like flowers turning toward the sun. When the king's decree was proclaimed, and many young women were gathered to the palace, Esther also was taken to the royal house and placed under the care of Haggai, the custodian of the women. Esther immediately found favor in Haggai's sight, and he provided her with beauty preparations, special food from the king's table, and 7 choice maid servants from the palace.
He also moved her and her maids to the best place in the house of the women. Following Mordecai's wise counsel, Esther had not revealed her Jewish heritage or her family background, keeping this knowledge safely hidden in her heart. Each day, Mordecai walked in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. His love and concern for her evident in his faithful attention. For 12 months, each young woman underwent beauty treatments, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. When each maiden's turn came to go before King Ahasuerus, she could request whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. When Esther's turn finally came, she requested nothing except what Haggai, the king's eunuch who kept the women, advised. Her natural beauty and gentle spirit were adorant enough, shining more brilliantly than any jewels or costly garments. All who saw her admired her grace and loveliness. Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus in his royal palace in the 10th month, and the king loved Esther more than all the other women. She obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. The king made a great feast for all his officials and servants, Esther's feast, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to his royal generosity. Meanwhile, as Mordecai sat within the king's gate where he held a minor position in the government, he overheard 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, plotting to harm King Ahasuerus. Being a man of integrity and loyalty, Mordecai told Queen Esther of this conspiracy, and she informed the king in Mordecai's name. When the matter was investigated and found to be true, both conspirators were hanged on gallows, and the incident was recorded in the Book of the Chronicles in the king's presence.
After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted a man named Haman the Agagite to high honor, setting his seat above all the princes who were with him. All the king's servants at the gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had commanded this. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage, for he worshipped only the God of Israel, and would not show such reverence to any mortal man. When the king's servants asked Mordecai day after day why he transgressed the king's command, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman about Mordecai's refusal. They also told Haman that Mordecai was a Jew, hoping to explain his behavior. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, he was filled with wrath like a pot boiling over with fury. But he scorned the idea of laying hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of Mordecai's people. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, Haman cast pur, that is, the lot, before himself to determine the day and month for his evil plan. The lot fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, giving him nearly a year to prepare his scheme. Then Haman approached King Ahasuerus with cunning words, speaking like a serpent, whispering poison into willing ears. There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom, he said smoothly.
Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasuries. The king, trusting Haman's counsel without investigating the matter thoroughly, took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman. The money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you, he said. On the 13th day of the first month, the king's scribes were called, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded. It was sent to the king's satraps, governors, and officials of all the provinces, sealed with the king's ring. The decree stated that all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, should be killed, destroyed, and annihilated on one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, and that their possessions should be plundered. Copies of the document were issued as law in every province and published for all people that they should be ready for that day. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan the citadel. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed and troubled by this cruel edict. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, his heart broke like a vessel shattered against stone. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, crying out with a loud and bitter cry. Throughout every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes, their hearts heavy with despair. When Esther's maids and eunuchs told her about Mordecai's distress, the queen was deeply troubled. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai and take away his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hatach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and she gave him a command to go to Mordecai to learn what this meant and why he was in such anguish. Hatach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, including the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, that Hatach might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and charge her to go in to the king to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. When Hatach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai, her heart filled with fear and anguish. She sent this message back to Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king who has not been called has but one law: put all to death except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter that he may live.
Yet I myself have not been called to go into the king these 30 days." Mordecai's response came back with the urgency of thunder following lightning. "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish."
Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? These words pierced Esther's heart like arrows finding their mark. She realized that her position as queen, her beauty, her favor with the king, all of it might have been divinely orchestrated for this very moment. Perhaps she had been chosen not just to be a queen, but to be a deliverer of her people. With courage flowing into her heart like water filling an empty vessel, Esther sent this reply to Mori: "Go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." For 3 days and nights the Jews of Shushan fasted and prayed, their hearts united in supplication for their queen and for their deliverance. Esther spent these days in prayer and preparation, laying her fears and her life before the Almighty, asking for wisdom, courage, and favor. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes, which shimmered like captured starlight, and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, across from the king's house. When King Ahasuerus saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she found favor in his sight, and he held out to her the golden scepter that was in his hand. Esther approached and touched the top of the scepter, her heart beating like a bird's wings, but her demeanor calm and graceful. The king said to her kindly, "What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom." Esther, wise as a serpent but gentle as a dove, replied, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him."
The king was pleased by her invitation and commanded that Haman be called quickly to attend the banquet. So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. As they drank wine together, the king again asked, "What is your petition? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Up to half the kingdom it shall be done." Esther answered carefully, "My petition and request is this: if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them. And tomorrow I will do as the king has said." Haman went out that day joyfully and with a glad heart, feeling honored to be the only guest invited to dine with the king and queen. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, Haman was filled with indignation. Nevertheless, he restrained himself and went home, where he called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Haman boasted to them of his great riches, his many sons, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced above the officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, "Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared, and tomorrow I am again invited by her along with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." His wife and friends suggested that he build gallows 50 cubits high and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it.
Then he could go merrily with the king to the banquet. The suggestion pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. That night the king could not sleep, like a man tossing on his bed while thoughts chase each other through his mind. He commanded that the book of records of the Chronicles be brought and read before him. It happened that they read about the time when Mordecai had told of Bigthan and Teresh, the king's eunuchs who had sought to lay hands on King Artaxerxes. The king asked, "What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" His servants replied, "Nothing has been done for him." Just then, Haman came into the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared. The king asked, "Who is in the court?" His servants told him, "Haman is there, standing in the court." "Let him come in," said the king. When Haman entered, the king asked him, "What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor?" Haman thought in his heart, "Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?" So he answered, "For the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let this robe and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square, and proclaimed before him, 'Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.'" The king was pleased with this suggestion.
"Hurry," he said to Haman. "Take the robe and the horse as you have suggested, and do so for Mordecai the Jew who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken." Haman's face must have turned as pale as morning mist, but he had no choice but to obey. He took the robe and the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the city square, proclaiming before him, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." Afterward, Mordecai went back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning and with his head covered in shame. When he told his wife and friends what had happened, they said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him." While they were still talking, the king's eunuchs came and hastily brought Haman to the banquet that Esther had prepared. At this second banquet, as they drank wine, the king again asked Queen Esther, "What is your petition? It shall be granted." The servants covered Haman's face like condemned criminals awaiting execution. One of the eunuchs, Harbonner, said to the king, "Look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman." The king said simply, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai, and the king's wrath subsided like a storm that has finally passed. That day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told the king what Mordecai was to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman, but Esther's work was not yet finished. She fell down at the king's feet, weeping and begging him with tears to counteract the evil of Haman and his plot against the Jews. The king held out the golden scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen?" King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, "Indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hand on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews, as end their mourning into a holiday." They called these days Purim, after the term Pur, which Haman had cast to determine the day of the Jews' destruction. But what was meant for evil, God turned to good, and a day of intended mourning became a day of celebration that continues to this day. Queen Esther had found her purpose, not merely to be beautiful or to enjoy royal luxury, but to be in the right place at the right time to save her people. Her courage in risking her life, her wisdom in approaching the king, and her faithfulness to her heritage had made her an instrument of divine deliverance. As this story ends, you could see that even in the darkest times, when evil seems about to triumph, there is a God who watches over his people and can use even seemingly ordinary individuals to accomplish extraordinary things for the good of others and the glory of his name. Now let's learn from Jonah.
a man who tried to run from God, only to find that his love reaches everywhere, even in the depths of the ocean. In the ancient days, when the Assyrian Empire was mighty and fearsome, spreading its influence like a great shadow across the lands of the Middle East, there lived in Israel a prophet named Jonah, son of Amittai. Jonah was a man chosen by God to speak his words to the people, to deliver messages of warning and hope as the Lord directed. He was faithful in his calling, known throughout Israel as one who heard the voice of the Almighty and proclaimed it boldly to those who needed to hear it. One day, as Jonah went about his daily life in the peaceful hills of Israel, the word of the Lord came to him like thunder rolling across a clear sky. "Arise," said the divine voice that resonated in his heart. "Go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me." Nineveh was the magnificent capital of Assyria, a city of incredible size and splendor, but also a place of great cruelty and violence. Its walls were massive and imposing, its palaces grand and luxurious, its armies ruthless and powerful. The Assyrians were known throughout the ancient world for their fierce warriors and their harsh treatment of conquered peoples. They had been enemies of Israel for generations, causing much suffering and fear among God's chosen people. When Jonah heard this command, his heart filled not with obedience, but with resistance. The idea of going to Nineveh of all places to preach God's message to Israel's enemies was more than he could bear. Why should he help these cruel people who had caused so much pain to his own nation? Why should God show mercy to those who showed no mercy to others? Instead of heading northeast toward Nineveh as God had commanded, Jonah made a decision that would change his life forever.
He arose and fled in the opposite direction, going down to Joppa, a coastal city where ships came and went like migrating birds following the seasons. There he found a ship bound for Tarshish, a distant land far across the Mediterranean Sea, as far from Nineveh as he could possibly go. Jonah paid the fare for his passage, thinking perhaps that if he put enough distance between himself and God's command, he might escape the responsibility that had been placed upon his shoulders. He went down into the ship and settled among the other passengers and cargo, hoping to disappear among the crowd and flee from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord sent out a great wind on the sea, and there was a mighty tempest, so that the ship was about to be broken apart by the violence of the storm. The waves rose like moving mountains, crashing over the vessel with tremendous force. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing at the sails and rigging. The ship groaned and creaked as it was tossed about like a toy in the hands of an angry child. The mariners were afraid, and every man cried out to his God for help. They threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it, hoping this might help them survive the terrible storm. Boxes and bundles, precious goods and supplies, everything was sacrificed to the hungry waves in their desperate attempt to save their lives. But Jonah had gone down into the lowest parts of the ship, and he lay there fast asleep, somehow managing to slumber peacefully while the tempest raged above.
Perhaps exhaustion from his emotional turmoil had overcome him. Or perhaps he was trying to hide even from himself the knowledge of what he had done. The ship's captain came to him, his face showing both confusion and desperation. "What do you mean, sleeper?" he called out, shaking Jonah awake. "Arise, call on your God. Perhaps your God will consider us so that we may not perish." The sailors, meanwhile, were convinced that this unnatural storm had come upon them because of someone's wrongdoing. "Come," they said to one another, "let us cast lots, that we may know for whose cause this trouble has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah, pointing to him as clearly as if a finger had been extended from heaven. Immediately all eyes turned to Jonah, and the questions came like arrows. "Tell us, please, for whose cause this trouble has come upon us? What is your occupation, and where do you come from? What is your country, and of what people are you?" Jonah could no longer hide the truth. With a heavy heart he confessed, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." When the men heard this, they were exceedingly afraid, for they understood that the God of the Hebrews was the creator of all things, the one who controlled the very forces of nature that were now threatening to destroy them.
"Why have you done this?" they asked, for Jonah had told them that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord. As the storm continued to rage with unabated fury, the sea becoming more tempestuous by the moment, the men asked Jonah desperately, "What shall we do to you that the sea may be calm for us?" Jonah, recognizing the justice of his situation and the danger his disobedience had brought upon these innocent sailors, replied with resignation, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will become calm for you. For I know that this great tempest is because of me." The mariners were good men at heart, and they did not want to take Jonah's life if they could avoid it. They rowed hard to bring the ship to land, fighting against the wind and waves with all their strength, but they could not succeed, for the sea continued to grow more tempestuous against them, as if nature itself was demanding that justice be done. Finally, with heavy hearts, they cried out to the Lord, "We pray, O Lord, please do not let us perish for this man's life, and do not charge us with innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you." Then they picked up Jonah and threw him into the sea, and immediately the sea ceased from its raging. The sudden calm was more dramatic than the storm had been. The waves settled into gentle swells, the wind dropped to a whisper, and the ship floated peacefully on waters that had moments before been trying to destroy it. The men were filled with great fear and reverence for the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to God and made vows to serve him. But Jonah's story was far from over. As he sank beneath the surface of the deep, expecting to drown for his disobedience, the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow him. Some say it was a whale, others a giant fish. Unlike the temple, those who regard worthless idols forsake their own mercy.
But I will sacrifice to you with the voice of thanksgiving. I will pay what I have vowed. Salvation is of the Lord. On the third day the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Imagine Jonah's relief as he felt solid ground beneath his feet once again, as he breathed fresh air and felt the warmth of the sun on his face. He was covered with seaweed and perhaps bore other signs of his unusual journey, but he was alive and free, given a second chance to obey God's command. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach to it the message that I tell you." This time Jonah arose and went to Nineveh, according to the word of the Lord. The city was enormous, so large that it took 3 days to walk through it completely. Its walls stretched for miles, encompassing palaces, temples, markets, and homes for hundreds of thousands of people. As Jonah entered the city, he must have felt overwhelmed by its size and grandeur, knowing that he had been sent to deliver an unpopular message to its inhabitants. On the first day of his journey through Nineveh, Jonah began to preach, crying out in the streets and marketplaces, "Yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown." His voice carried the authority of divine judgment, and his message was clear and urgent. What happened next was perhaps the most surprising revival in human history. The people of Nineveh believed God and proclaimed a fast. From the greatest to the least, they put on sackcloth as a sign of mourning and repentance. Word came to the king of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne, laid aside his royal robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. The king made a proclamation throughout the city.
He still hoped, perhaps, that God might change his mind and destroy Nineveh. After all, the Lord God prepared a plant, likely a gourd or vine, that grew rapidly, and made it come up over Jonah to give shade for his head and deliver him from his grief. Jonah was very grateful for the plant and the comfort it provided from the scorching sun. But when morning came the next day, God prepared a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered. When the sun arose, God prepared a vehement east wind, and the sun beat on Jonah's head so that he grew faint and wished death for himself, saying, "It is better for me to die than to live." Then God said to Jonah, "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" Jonah replied stubbornly, "It is right for me to be angry, even to death." But the Lord said gently, "You have had pity on the plant for which you have not labored, nor made it grow, which came up in a night and perished in a night. And should I not pity Nineveh, that great city, in which are more than 120,000 persons who cannot discern between their right hand and their left, and much livestock?" With these words, the book of Jonah ends, leaving us to ponder the lesson God was teaching his reluctant prophet. The story shows us that God's love and mercy extend beyond the boundaries we might set, that his compassion reaches even to those we might consider unworthy. It reminds us that God's ways are higher than our ways, his thoughts higher than our thoughts. Jonah learned that we cannot flee from God's presence or escape his calling on our lives.
He discovered that God's mercy is greater than human understanding, and that the Lord desires repentance rather than destruction, forgiveness rather than judgment. As we rest in the quiet hours of night, we can take comfort in knowing that the same God who gave Jonah a second chance, who showed mercy to the repentant Ninevites, and who patiently taught his reluctant prophet about love and forgiveness, watches over us with the same divine compassion and infinite patience.